see how easy this process is. Probably already out. Really don't even think that I need to hit it any harder than that. Fantastic.
Hi again, everybody. This is the second part of the African Sumac build. Just taking some edges off here. Makes it a lot safer for handling because as soon as you pull them out of that mold, they do have a sharp edge. Pretty piece of wood though. You can see how red it is. That is going to go away once we surface it. But we'll just put it back in the sun for a little bit and it should darken right back up. Right here I'm just putting some carpet tape to hold it down. I'll also use some hot glue just to make sure it doesn't move. And generally, I'll take about anywhere from 0.07 to 0.05 on the first pass. I knew this one was a little lopsided, so I think I go a little bit shallower at 0.05. So yeah, as you can see right here, we're a little low on the front side here, which is fine. I knew that was going to be the case. So I took 0.05 off here. Next pass, I'll go to 0.07 until I'm happy with how much I've actually taken off the top. And I just want a nice, clean, flat surface all the way across the board. And I'll wrap everything up with probably a 0.02 pass. That's pretty typical of what I do. And that just helps avoid any chip out. So this is actually a 0.04 pass that I'm doing right here. I know I'm close. There's a little spot in the back that I'm not quite happy with, and I know I need to go a little bit deeper than 0.02, so taking half of that right now. I will wrap this up with one final 0.02 inch pass, and that just, like I said, really helps with avoiding any chip out and having to clean up the epoxy. So just showing you here how well a 0.02 inch pass actually works. There are some tooling marks, but you can't feel them. It's super smooth, no chip out. There are some burn marks on the wood, but that's to be expected because we're surfacing for the epoxy, not the wood. Just pulling up the old carpet tape, flipping it over, cleaning it up with some isopropyl alcohol, putting a little bit more tape because I know I'm going to be chewing through this thing a little bit more aggressively than I was before. Plus we're going to do a couple of different tooling operations here. I do zero it in the front and the back because I do know it was a little lopsided. So I just want to know that that difference is so I can provide a 0.07 inch pass. And the backside is a little bit lower. So of course I'm insecure and I throw some hot glue down to help hold it down in place. You can see here in this video too that the backside is quite a bit off actually, so which is fine because I do need to take off more. You can see that cavity that's in the front right there too that needs to get a little bit lower. So here I'm just showing what the chip out looks like when you do a 0.07 pass. It's there, it exists. I see this in tons of videos, and I try and help whoever I can to avoid this. And all you got to do is just a shallower pass where basically you can totally eliminate that chip out. So shallower passes. Same if you just have like a sled, a router sled, just shallower passes, and you'll avoid it. And it's not different for different epoxies. It works on all epoxies that I've found so far. So while the machine is going back and forth here doing its thing, it'd be really cool if you guys could hit the subscribe button, like, or even comment. Help the algorithm out. I'd appreciate it. So right here I'm finishing up the last pass of 0.02 inches, just like we did on the other side. You can see the wood's pretty shiny. It's getting hot. That's the price you pay for keeping your epoxy really clean. So generally I like to narrate these videos, and it cuts out on some of the background noise. Occasionally I'll let you listen to live audio, but since I'm in Arizona, the garage is always hot, so the air conditioner's always on, and there always is that background noise. But anyway, what I'm showing you here is just how smooth and nice and how effortlessly it's going to be to actually sand this in the end. And you'll see that. I'll show that in later videos, just how much easier it is in the sanding process. Plus you skip most of having to do touch-up. The only touch-up I'm really going to have to do is throw some epoxy or some CA glue into these cracks on the wood, and that's about it. But you can see here just how fine and nice that edge is. I mean, like, it's sharp. It will cut you. It's that good, and there's no chip out at all. So you hear me say that word a lot, but anywho. So you can see here there's some voids. You're always going to run into that once you resurface anytime. When you're first sealing the slab, you're just not going to get 100% penetration with the epoxy that you put on there. So we will have to deal with that a little bit later. Not a huge deal. It's not nearly as hard as having to deal with chips in the epoxy though. So cleaning it up, going to tape it back up, flip it over, and then we'll finish making this a proper circle and exposing the edge on the outsides, and then we'll also do a bevel cut.
So I found the center of this thing, and that's how I'm gonna reference my machine here. But I'll plot down the XY coordinates of where this exact spot is by moving my machine over here. I'll show you in a minute. But real simply, all I did was take a tape measure, divide it by roughly in half what my diameter is, which is 12, a little bit under, and just kind of did that all the way around, found my center. So, and there's a couple different ways you could do this. I mean, you could just as easily take a point here with the CNC machine, a point here, and a point here, and triangulate your circle that way. I just find it easier to do it this way, so that's what I'm going to do. So the best way to do this is put a V-bit on. Get that focused on there. So anyway, and you're going to direct that to your point there. I'm going to set up the camera and we'll be right back. That's my mark right there. I've got the pencil right here just to kind of show you. It's a little tricky to see, but I've changed my jog rate on the machine to 5%. Of 600, so this is only 30 inches per minute, but so that's going to give me, and I don't need to dive into the wood, but I'm pretty close here. And so now I'll make my circle based upon this. So now all I have to do is write down my X and Y here, and then I can hop over to V-carve and make my circles and stuff, and I'll show you what's going on here in a second.
So I've now created the 2 circles in the drawing tab using the draw circle feature, and the first thing that you'll notice here is that I've got 2 different circles, one for a bevel and one for a final cutout. And then in the draw circle feature, the first 2 options are your X and Y. That's what you're going to plug in from Mach 4 on the CNC program. Anyway, so I do have two different circles here. One, the teal line is the bevel cut, and the red line is actually the final cut. And I usually will just offset my bevel cut by like a 32nd of an inch or so. That way I get a nice clean pass all the way around, and any mistakes or errors that might happen, some chip out, whatever, it gets cleaned up by that final pass, just being in a little bit closer. So we're going to do our bevel cut at 0.4 inches. I use a Whiteside 1550 60-degree V-bit. I am going to do that tool path in 3 different passes. Take about 1.7 inches off for the first 2 passes, and then a 0.05 inch pass for the last pass. I struggle here to do that, get that done, because I didn't recognize that I'm trying to put 2 decimal places in here, but whatever. Eventually I get it figured out. And I don't know if I get into it, but my feeds and speeds for this particular bit, 18,000 RPM, 100 inches per minute, and these are my depths of cut that I'm physically going to be doing. So, and you can see here I finally get it dialed in. It's difficult to hold a camera and run a program all at the same time and trying to narrate. So I do a ramp as well, 2 inches. Anything 2 times the drill bit diameter is usually pretty good, and my diameter in total is going to be like a half an inch on this thing. So, but anyway, here's our final cut at the depth of 1.56 inches. My material is 1.54 inches, so we'll just barely chew through it right into the spoil board. No big deal. These are my feeds and speeds for that particular tool. Not nearly as aggressive as I would on just like a piece of hardwood. It's just a little different with epoxy, and I don't care what really happens to the wood. I can always clean that up later. There are lots of passes on this. And once again, that's just all for the epoxy. And if you didn't notice the machine vectors on the V-bit, I do that on the line, and the final cut I do that on the outside of the line. There'll be a final separate last pass of 0.015 inches. So that means it's going to do the full depth of cut, 1.56 inches, but it's going to chew off 0.015 inches and provide a nice clean line all the way around. And here I'm just zeroing the V-bit.
So a good habit to get into when you're doing these types of cuts and you're doing things on the fly, you're not necessarily sure. Let's do a test pass where we just offset. So I'll just come here in G code. That minus 11 number, it was minus 11.4648. Now it's minus 11.0. So that actually puts us at a Z of 1.6 now instead of 2. So the machine thinks it's lower than it actually is. And what we'll do, we'll just go ahead and run a test pass here. And we don't need the, you can see here. Now we're roughly close, but it doesn't look exactly like our center, does it? And that is why we do these things. So that's pretty close there. But you can just see. You can't really see from this side. Now it's getting lower. But you can see that we're kind of outside the boundaries of where we really want to be. So especially right here, right? Now we're getting closer. So what are we gonna do? We'll just shrink our circles up, move them a little bit.
So all I really did was literally shrink some circles up by, I think, 1/2 inch in total. And now I'm doing my cut here, and 3 passes, like I said before.
Just a quick little show and tell here. Yeah, we weren't perfectly in the center. I knew we weren't, because the mold created a, in some places it was 24 inches, in some places it was 23 3/4, so that's okay. We knew we'd lose a little bit, but that's part of the game. So these are my normal compression bits that I use. See if I can get. So we're going to use the longer one, of course, and should be able to make it through this thing at 1.5 inches, just over.
So we're just Zing our compression bit here. Now we're going to take our 8 passes, chew this out, and I do blow this out with an air compressor. Just make sure that when you're doing this that you do not get epoxy chips inside your spindle. Bad news bears.
It's not too bad as far as waste is concerned. A little bit I'll have to sand here. There's a little edge. Not much. Something weird happened there. But all in all, came out really well.
So just doing a final cleanup here. Gonna flip it over, do the same thing. I did at this point wanted to test and see how the epoxy in the wood is going to react to being in the sun. So I did set this table up out in the backyard, and I am in Avondale, Arizona. It's hot. I think it was 102, 103 that day, which isn't extremely hot, but anyway, you can see how our wood here it's pretty white, and that little dark piece of red there in the bottom left-hand corner, that's where we're trying to take it. But we'll see how things go. You know, I don't want the epoxy to just completely melt away, but here's my dog Dessa. But this is after a couple hours, and so the wood's already starting to darken up. But that's going to be the end of this video, and I'll see you in the next one where we touch up some spots as far as those voids and maybe some sanding.